You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hello, my friends. It's Thursday and we're back again with episode number 386 of Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. In our show, we meet loads of ordinary people doing pretty extraordinary things, and today is absolutely no exception. I was introduced to Steve Vilsack, or why not, by one of my Trail Days friends and former guest on the show, Emily Leonard. Emily and her husband Bruce have helped the show by suggesting guests who they think would be great for an interview. I think their judgment's good because Steve, or why not, was an excellent guest. We're going to hear from him in a moment. Once again, we have a pretty packed show with two catch-ups with our Mighty Blue class of 2023, another reading from Then the Hail Came, and as a bonus, I'm talking with Justin Mullins about the Allegheny Trail, what it's like, and its anniversary coming up. Justin will fit into the gap between this week's class members. So let's get going. I'm delighted to be able to introduce you all to a special guy. This is Steve Vilsack, or why not. We've got another listener suggestion today. Emily Leonard, who was on the show a while back, connected me to Steve Vilsack. Hey, Steve, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we had a bit of a technical snafu to get on there. We've eventually worked it out, so hopefully this is going to work out fine. Now, you've had quite a ride with the Appalachian Trail, haven't you? And your through hike was unlike, I guess, pretty much everybody's hike. Tell us why a long-distance trail for you was extremely unlikely.
Well, I had always wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail. And as I got older, in my mid-30s, I was diagnosed with a retinal eye disease that has taken my eyesight. Bit by bit, it's been a slow progression. And to a point where I'm legally blind now, I can't drive a car. So I had just finished up college, graduated, and thought, before I get a job, maybe I hike the Appalachian Trail.
Right.
And so I said, well, I bought my gear and then got everything ready and gave it a go starting in February 12th, 2015.
That's interesting. That was after college, and you're I believe you're 57 now, is that right?
That's correct.
I'm going to talk about that in a second, actually, but I want to talk about the legal blindness. You explained it to me when we were speaking before. Can you tell us what it looks like to you right now?
Well, basically, the best way I can describe it to people is at night I can't see hardly anything at all. Mm-hmm. And then during the day, it's usually a whiteout, and I see through the center part of my vision like looking down a straw. And, that's basically, I can see clearly in the center, I can see people's face. I can even see to read. So a lot of my friends don't even understand my vision impairment unless they see me walk around and run into things.
Yeah, we're going to talk about you running into things later, which was funny, by the way. I shouldn't laugh, I know, but
no, that's fine. I have to laugh myself.
We'll talk about that in a minute, actually. So you got this kind of tunnel vision, as it were, and it started getting bad 21 years ago. You were diagnosed, mm-hmm. and you said that your vision now is down to only 5%. What was it like when you hiked in 2015?
It was probably closer to about 8%.
Okay.
Field of vision.
8%.
Versus most people have about 140 degree. Well, they don't call it percentage; they call it degrees. So most people have 140 degrees of vision, for their peripheral, and I was down 8 when I did the trail.
Wow!
And you're legally blind when you're 20 degrees.
So, and that obviously has impacted the work you've been able to do to earn a living. Tell us what you were doing and what's happened after that.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I had lost everything, and because I was a realtor previous to that, even though I had a driver, the market just fell out. And so I ended up losing my house and had to give up my cars and everything. sold everything off, and then got a grant to go to college and finish my degree. And so when I finished the degree, I graduated top of my class, magna cum laude, but
Wow.
nobody would hire me because they wanted me to be able to drive. I was trying to get into the commercial market, and it was very difficult to get around and work with clients. So it was going to limit me to like a desk job at management, which isn't me. I prefer to get out. So after, even though I had done some interns in college, I wasn't getting any offers that made sense. So
Right.
I said, well, now's the time to go hike the trail.
So had you learned about the trail as a kid, and it was one of these? This was an ambition some time ago, then?
When I was younger, I actually had been on the trail with some friends' parents, and actually got lost then too. The gentleman that I was with actually drove me down to Georgia. He's no longer with us. His name was Rick Thompson.
Right. And so it was on your radar. You wanted to do it. Why did you think, with 8% vision, this was a good idea?
Well, I wanted to be able to see as much as I could while I could see in nature, and I wanted to test my physical. I've always been an athlete. I wanted to test my physical measure, and then also wanted to prove to anybody that would hire me when I finished, hopefully, that it wouldn't be a disability. I could do more than what most people could do.
Well, you've proved that later, and we're going to come to that later as well. And as with most things in life, you learned how to do it really when you were out there, didn't you? But how did you go about finding out what you needed on a long distance trip? Because, this is, in some ways, it's a specialized hobby, isn't it, really?
Oh, it is. And I read books and, motivational and then gear books. And, I didn't really get online and test, to see more about the equipment. It was mostly reading or audiobooks and such, like AWOL's hike and such. So I bought a tent. I really wasn't prepared. I had brought my ski jacket, which weighed a ton, and I dropped that in the beginning, and got a puffer jacket and a light raincoat. But you go out there as a fool first, and then you learn what to carry them. The only good thing I did do is I bought a small pack, and that kept me from carrying too much in the beginning. So
you told me it was a really small pack, wasn't it?
Well, it's a 44 cubic inches, and I recommend that to everybody. People always care what they fear the most, either be clothes, water, or food. So I didn't really have a choice. I carried what I could carry.
Which was virtually nothing, I presume.
Yeah, it wasn't much.
And I was wondering this when I was doing the notes this morning from our conversation the other day. As you've got limited vision, do your other senses get enhanced, or you don't even get that bonus?
My smell, I guess, has gotten a little better, but I don't know if that's a bonus or not.
Certainly not on the trail, I know.
Oh, not on the trail for sure. You can smell everybody. Well, you could always smell the day hikers coming about a mile away.
Of course, yeah. Oh, dear. So I still haven't got the idea right in my head. You thought it was time to do it because you're out of college, you couldn't get work at the time, so you thought, well, why not try it out and so on. Were you at all nervous about what might happen to you? Because most of it did happen to you, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, it was a tough journey.
Were you nervous about it?
No, actually, I'll be honest. I take that back. When I was in the hotel room and going through my pack, seeing what I should take and not take, and just going through it, I was starting to get nervous, and just should I take this? Do I need this? I was nervous, and then when I was dropped off, I actually started walking, and I wasn't sure at one point. I thought I'd gone the wrong way, but I hadn't, so that was a good thing.
So, how did you make your way through it? Were you hiking around people most of the time to keep your? Because the trail is okay to keep on; it's relatively easy to stay on. But in your case, it must have been particularly difficult. We're always looking for white blazes and so on. But frankly, I was always looking at my feet and making sure I could stay upright. You must have had a similar sort of thing, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I looked at the ground most of the time, and the blazes were rare if I even saw one on usually I wouldn't see one unless I was trying to find one. And, each section's different. And so what I found is the only way I could stay on trail, especially as the journey went, I got a lot of snow in the beginning. And well, that was kind of good because I could follow the track in the snow if somebody was in front of me. Yeah. But when the leaves dropped and everything, well, I found a lot of leaves blowing around after that in North Carolina, made it difficult finding my way. And I just had to use my pole and basically tamping on the ground to see if it was soft or hard.
Wow.
And then as I started getting a little further north where the rocks started coming, I really had to start looking at the wear of the rocks. I could see just enough of whether, the rock had been worn from the other hikers and stuff. And that's the best way I could keep on trails, the feel of it.
Well, jumping ahead a little, I'm going to come back I'm actually jumping out of order here. But so you were looking down a lot. I can remember going down the north side of some of those mountains in New Hampshire and in Maine, and they were dangerous anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And to not be able to see was doubly dangerous, I suspect. Were you hiking with somebody to sort of help you through it or not?
Yeah, there were a lot of times I was hiking with different people. The trail's a community and they do look out for you, and word got out that my impairment, was tough. If I was sitting in the shelter or just sitting and talking to people didn't know. But if they saw me on the trail, they usually found me going the wrong way or off the trail. So they would yell at me, "Why not? You're going the wrong way." But that would just make me laugh. And then that's how I would meet people, actually. They say, I said, let me hike with you then for a little while. And then, you get to meet. And then eventually, those people would move forward or somebody would come up from behind. So that's, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, to answer your first question, yeah, I got to hike with a lot of great people and still good friends with a lot of them as well to this day.
And how did you get the name Why Not, by the way? And it's W-Y-E, isn't it? And K-N-O-T. So
that's correct.
Who gave you that name?
Well, it actually, I have to say that when I was in my college room deciding whether I was going to go, really that day was going to be the day that I was going to go, make the decision to sublet my place out. And I said, well, why not? And that's what I said. And then it just stuck and it hit me in the chest like, that's your name. Why not? And so then I said, well, the why oak tree is Maryland state tree. And I was born in Maryland. So I was like, well, and grew up in Maryland. So I was like, well, I'll just, I'll go with that. The why not, being a why oak tree. State
cool.
tree.
Very neat. It's a real good name. And you told me that you had support from your mother and your sister, but their first reaction can't have been all positive, can it? What did they think about you going, considering what, how, your limited vision?
Well, they know.
I know you can do what you like. You're an adult. Of course you can do what you like.
I mean, they care for me. My mom just passed away just about a year ago, but yeah, she was, of course, she believed in me, and I'd already had the vision impairment for some time by then, and they knew I could do pretty much anything I put my mind to. So, but yeah, they were always worried about me because I'm the type that would always push myself to the outer limits of my abilities, and so and I would get hurt a lot too. So they just worried about me and always kept saying, slow down. Because everybody followed me on Facebook. I used that as a means of making sure people could see that I was doing it okay.
Right. But you weren't doing okay to start with, were you? You had a pretty tough start, didn't you? You kept telling me about, you lost quite a bit of stuff in those early days. Tell us about losing stuff all the time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, it was snowing out. And, most people, when it's snowing out, don't put out their tents. It was early in February. So everybody's packed in the shelter. So, in the shelter, it's dark for a person like myself. So you put your stuff out and you try to be good. In the beginning, you're just learning how to keep organized. I mean, that's a whole concept of trying to, keep all your stuff together. And I hadn't put that together quite yet. And I would lose a glove. I'd lose a sock. I would lose. I lost it. I lost my tent. I lost my ID. I lost my money.
What maybe you lost your tent?
Well, my tent would. I had my mom. Well, no, I had bought one. It was instead of a tent, I had brought my. I did a hammock. A very nice hammock.
Right.
And I thought I had put it in my backpack well enough, but I didn't. It wasn't stuffed inside. It was on the outside kind of stuffed in. And I fell and slipped and it popped out. This is what I assumed because people told me they saw it on the trail. But so that was lost and never got that back. It was about a $400 tent.
So nothing's putting you off at this stage, but then you, just 3 weeks in, you broke your wrist. How did that happen? Was that a fall?
Well, yeah, I did break my wrist. What happened is I had just I had an infected toenail from an ingrown toenail.
By the way, I'm only laughing because you and I were laughing about this when you told me.
It was painful. So, the hike was getting very painful walking with an infected toe. Yeah. And I was going to cut the toenail out myself. Literally, I was so upset with it. And the guy said, some medic said, you shouldn't do that yourself. You really need to go see a doctor. And a very nice person that was a waiter at NOC. Gosh, I wish I remembered. I got his name written down, but can't remember right now. But he drove me an hour away to go to a place to basically get my toenail cut out. And so the next day I had it all wrapped up and taped up with duct tape and gauze and everything, and had new boots my sister had sent me. And then I'm going. So the new boots really weren't broke in, and I don't think they were grabbing very good. And we got to Jacob's Ladder. I was with a gentleman by the name of Felix. That was his trail name. And we got there and we started to ascend, and there was ice on it. And I went to turn to go up, and I didn't want to lose my pole, so I never put my strap around my wrist before. And I put it around there and went to take a step, and sure enough, I fell, and it basically snapped my wrist. I heard a pop, and it just immediately swelled up. And I was like, wow, that's a really bad sprain. So I went into town and got one of these braces that I could tighten up on it, and to keep it, and iced it and everything. It was throbbing. It hurt like hell. And so I used that to go through the Smokies, basically. I wore that the whole time. And so as soon as I got out into Tennessee, I met a nice couple 3 weeks later who, Mike and Peggy, they had a place right on the river that I stayed. And they took me to the hospital, and sure enough, they said it was broken and put a cast on it. So, jeez. And then I was like, oh, how am I going to hike with this? And
I recently had an operation on my hand, only a couple of weeks ago, actually. And I realized pretty quickly how debilitating it is to lose the use of one hand. And I didn't do, I type obviously, but nothing else really. You told me before about tying your laces with one hand.
Oh, God.
I can't imagine how you did that first off, but didn't you ever consider going home just to let yourself mend before coming out again? Because you still started this hike quite early on, didn't you?
I did, but there was no second thought to turning around. And my boots were freezing in the morning. Solid. I had learned how to put them in the sleeping bag in a plastic bag, so they were solid bricks of ice in the morning.
Yes, happy
days. Putting them on, it was very painful, and my toe had not healed. It was still hurting, but the hardest part I found is, well, of course, I could only hike with one pole, and I needed 2 poles with my sight. And I found that the hardest part was in the morning, when I went to pack up, because it was my right hand, I couldn't stuff my sleeping bag. It was a fat sleeping bag into my pack, so I basically figured out a way to do it with my left hand, and then just tying my shoes. Yes, it was very difficult. I just did the best I could. And eventually I got a new set of boots that I didn't have to tie.
Did you ever really enjoy it out there?
Oh, yeah. You enjoy the challenge of, there were a lot of low points, but, the high points were just, you're just out in nature and life isn't easy altogether. You just enjoy every moment in the nature. For me, it just felt so good to be out there.
You did actually say, and I quote you here, it never got glorious.
No, never. I wouldn't say it was glorious at any point.
But then you said that the best part was the top of the mountain and what it took to get there. Reflect on that a bit.
The views, it's like you're in heaven. You're just looking up. Even though my sight is limited, I don't see the profile, but to look around and just see how far you could see, and it just, the smells actually, and just everything. Just, I recommend hiking the trail for everybody, just to have that feeling of joy. It's almost like, a major achievement in business or in life or sports, whatever. When you reach the top of the mountain, you've really just you just conquered something, and that took you a lot to get there. I mean, you hiked, what that feels like.
It's a great metaphor, isn't it? Reaching the top of the mountain in anything in your life is a fantastic feeling, because you exactly what it took you to get there, didn't you? And in your case, it probably took more for you than it did for most of us. Now, we've mentioned a few lowlights, and I know you had some highlights, and you just mentioned some of those, but I know that trail magic was and continues to be really important for you. Tell us about that.
That out of all my entire hike, I'd have to say that trail magic was like, it was like a blessing, and that somebody would care enough and want nothing just to help you out. And I can tell you, every time I hit trail magic, your heart just lights up, and it's almost like you struck gold.
Yes.
And it's just like that caffeine that they leave there for you, let it be Coke, candy, or anything, it brought such a joy in it to everybody. And occasionally you have what's called trail tragic, where nothing's in the cooler.
Oh yeah, that's the worst, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that is the worst. But at least hopefully there's some ice in there. You get a little bit of ice,
I never heard trail tragic before, but that's exactly what it feels like. You're right.
Oh God.
And I know I should laugh, but you told me that you quite literally ran into people on the trail.
Yeah, sometimes people would just stand on the side of the trail and they wouldn't know that I was coming through, or they don't know my condition, and I would actually I wouldn't even know they were there, and just knock into them. They'd stop to read their map or to talk, not talk on the phone, but text or whatever, and I'd literally run into them or walk by him. Someone would say, "Damn, he is blind." I remember that. I think his name was Turley. He said, "God, he is blind." Anyway, so yeah, I was looking through a small hole,
Did it get worse when you were actually out there, by the way, or better? Or neither?
My hope was that it would actually, that was another thing. I hoped that it would improve my vision, overall, the fact that I had to use it so much. And, but I didn't see an improvement. When you're hiking, you're using every ounce of energy you got.
Sure.
Your sight, if you're blind or not, gets worse because, I don't know, I guess the blood rushes to your head and just can't see. And so there were times where I was seeing less than I probably could have seen had I not been hiking. So
yeah, very possibly, I suppose.
That happened to me in Maine.
Really?
I told you about my fall.
Yes, well, we're going to come to that in a minute, actually. Yeah, and talking of falls, people on this show know that every time I took a fall on the trail, once I'd realised I wasn't dead and I could carry on, I wasn't injured, I'd shout out the number, and I think it was 46 first time, 43 second time. Tell us about the number 47 for you.
Well, that wasn't how many times I fell. I couldn't count that high.
I know.
For God's sake. And it's in the thousands how many times I fell. But so when I was in Georgia, I started noticing I was hitting my head on trees and everything. And sometimes hard, sometimes light. But for the most, even though I wore a hat, and that was a saving grace itself. I would hit my head, and I was like, I better start keeping track of that. And how many times am I really going to hit my head here? And so I said, well, I can't count that one. That didn't leave a mark. And so I started counting when they left a bump, at least a bump or a cut. And so that number turned out to be 47. I was hoping
47.
I could stop at 44 when I got to 44, because that was my lucky number in football. But I went far exceeded that. Well, not far exceeded, 3 more than that. So 47 times I had hit my head pretty good.
And you just mentioned about getting injured in Maine. This was, and frankly, how you even got through Moosilauke Notch, I have no idea. But you actually got through it and had a real problem, didn't you? So
I did. I was hiking with some very close friends, and all 3 young ladies, all pretty much my age, and we started going through Moosilauke Notch. I'm looking at these boulders and just with amazement, like, I don't even see where I get through this area. And so they had gone ahead of me a little bit, so I was really struggling to find the gaps or where you would even go to get through Moosilauke Notch. And so anyway, they were both ahead of me, turning around occasionally to keep an eye on me. And so I went to take a step, and the sun was out, and I thought I was stepping on a rock, dark rock, and there was nothing there. And I fell face forward into like this big hole and landed right on my ribs and with my pack on my back, and got stuck in there, and I couldn't even get out. I mean, I literally was stuck. I could not move.
Wow.
And so had they not been there, I don't know how I would have ever got out of there. And plus I had injured myself, so I didn't have the strength. And so they literally had to grab me, grab my pack and my legs and pull me out of there. That was Black Bear and Moxie, Emily Leonard.
Right, Emily, yeah.
And so, so they pulled me up out of there, and I was in so much pain. I was like, I better start taking a bunch of vitamin I right now. And so I did. I whatever I had in my bottle, I must have took about 6 or 7, and just drank a crap load of water, and then so I was like, okay, and then so I didn't know what was coming up. I mean, I didn't look at the charts. I just knew I had to get through it. And so from that point, they would not they wouldn't let me get out of their sight. They made me hike between them. And so I did, and we got to where it was the arm goes up Moosilauke Notch, and it's virtually tough. Straight up.
Yeah, that's tough.
And so you got to almost pull yourself up a lot of times on limbs and everything. And so another couple came by, Mr. Peanut Butter and Iron Maiden married couple. And I had hiked with them previously, and so I knew him well. And so he stayed with me, basically, and basically I followed him up the mountain. But it was probably one of the most painful things I've ever done in my entire life. It was like a knife.
you broke your ribs, didn't you? And broken ribs, I know, are terrible. They're only terrible when you breathe, aren't they? Broken ribs.
Just everything, and you got a pack on your back.
Oh yeah.
It was very painful. I had hurt my ribs, but I don't think I had broken them previously.
So. And you mentioned Emily. She's the one who suggested we speak as well. But she didn't help you much, did she, one day? Took you the wrong way, did she?
Oh, she did, yeah. But yeah, that was that. We had gone to a lot of, this is how I always got turned around south myself, by myself, is I would go to like an overview to look out over something. And then when you turn around to come back, really, there's white blazes on both sides, so you don't know if you're going south or north. And I said, I think it's this way, Black Bear. She's like, no, it's this way. So I had to trust her because she could see. And she took us down the mountain south for about a half mile. And we had to climb back up. I don't think we said a word coming back up.
That's hilarious.
But I forgave her, for sure.
So after all that, I guess that staggering up Katahdin, after all that difficulty, those injuries, those falls, and those banging your head and bumping into people, you must have felt pretty much accomplished that you'd actually done it. Was it satisfying at the time?
When I got there, I mean, I'd say the whites were really satisfying. That to me was really my final summit, is because the whites, you have to get into the cabins and whatever. So that was great. So Katahdin, my brother-in-law wanted to basically hike with me, and he wasn't as in shape as he could have been. Yeah, he wasn't me because he hadn't hiked,
Sure.
so much. So I took it really slow in the beginning going up, and my ribs had healed some, since that point, because I had 200 some miles to go with broken ribs, and it took me a while.
God.
It took me. I stayed at the cabin, they call it, for about a week, and I'd also fallen and split my hip wide open as well. Pretty good slash with my ribs. That was probably the lowest point, and I thought, I can't quit now, but I'm hating this whole thing. And so, but to answer your question, when I got to Katahdin, it was almost like I was numb, because I was there, and I was like, oh, this is something that, but it really didn't hit me as emotionally as I thought it would. I mean, I felt accomplished, but it wasn't until on my ascent down descent down, that I realized I had done it. There's like a waterfall there, and I thought, oh my God, I'm done. I finished this thing.
Yeah.
And so I kind of, in a moment, because when you're up on top of the mountain, in Katahdin, there's a lot of people, so you really don't. Most people aren't going to break down in front of most other people. So my moment was pretty much when I was alone on my descent down the mountain. So
I had tears in front of everybody.
Yeah. Oh, did you?
both times. Yeah, I had tears, definitely. Yeah,
Oh,
no
wow.
question. And how were you physically in the end? Did it take you a long time to recover?
Oh yeah. I went to go see the doctor and had him check me out. He said that I was pretty beat up, and I went and had my feet checked out, and it was really bad. I didn't think it would take me 3 months to heal, though. It really took a long time, and I thought it would eventually get better within a month, but no, it took me 3 months.
But it was a pretty positive experience for you generally. And we talked earlier on, not earlier on, but when we spoke before, about limitations, and you actually don't feel you have limitations yourself in many ways, do you?
I don't.
So what is your mindset now going forward? Because you are, we did mention before, you are eventually going to go completely blind, aren't you?
I am, probably in about another 7 years.
Right. So what's the plan?
Well, right now, I'm working on building my wood shop, and going to try to build as many pieces of furniture artwork right now as I can when I finish it. But limitations, I've always tested my limits, and I think limitations really are created in the mind. And if you don't let them, if you don't think that you have limitations, you can pretty much do anything in life. And of course, you got to be very careful too, because you kill yourself. But at the same time, you just test it, keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, and then you're going to have failures. You're going to get hurt.
Sure.
And you have to accept that, because when you start worrying about that, then that just stops you from doing anything in life.
Well, tell us about then the cabin, because you took on this project with this cabin, which was, you sent me these great photographs, by the way. They look terrific.
Thank you.
You've renovated a cabin right near the AT. So tell us about it and the plans you've got for it.
Yes. I was very blessed. God blessed me. I was at a ball game with a close friend named Greg Ravelis, and he basically said, "Hey, did you see that property I sent you?" And my degree is in real estate and economic development. I said, "No, I didn't see that." So I looked it up. I said, "Well, I'm going to see that tomorrow." As soon as I saw it, it was a little tiny cabin, 400 some square foot, 480 square foot at the time. And it was right on the Appalachian Trail. It backs up to it. It's literally 150 yards from back door to the trail itself. So, but it had been abandoned for like 7 years, and the roof had leaked. The whole back wall had to be replaced, including the roof, electric, plumbing, everything in it. And so I thought, well, if I could just live in it and work on it, then I'd have my own place right on the Appalachian Trail. And so, I just started working on it, buying the material, fixing everything myself. I replaced the entire roof, the whole back wall, everything in it, 100%. Wow. And it came out wonderful. So now that I'm pretty much complete with the interior and exterior of that building, I designed and built a cabin. Well, not a cabin. It's what I call a workshop. That's 20 by 16, and it's at the back of the property, and it'll be a place where I work on stuff, and if I have a guest maybe off the trail, they could stay there and visit for the night. It's not going to have running water; it'll just have electric, and so that's the plan.
That is so cool. I tell you, I'm embarrassed how many times I fell. I mean, I can see everything, and yet you fall over, you bang, you've got more bangs on your head than I actually had falls. So the falls you just lost count of. Emily was right, to interview you. It's pretty inspirational for me, and I've done this a couple of times, so I know how tough it is to do it when you can see. But to do it in your situation, I admire you so much for doing it, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing the story with us.
Oh, thank you so much this is the first time most people that are going to listen to this are going to say, I didn't even know Steve was blind.
Do you know what? That speaks to how you live your life. So that's another thing that's so admirable that you didn't say to people, I'm blind, by the way, blind man coming through. You didn't want to do that. You just bumped into people.
I think people want to be normal no matter what their disabilities in life are.
Of course they do. Of course they do.
But thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Speak to you soon, okay?
Okay.
Cheers. Bye. Can you imagine doing the AT legally blind? I could see fine, but I still fell over a heck of a lot. Steve was convinced he could do anything he set his mind to, and of course he was darn right. And I thought his line near the end was just perfect. He said, if you don't think you have limitations, you can do pretty much anything in life. That was special. And I tell you, he sent me pictures of the house he's renovated, as well as the wood shop he's put together. And once again, I'm fully sighted. I couldn't do that. So amazing guy. And I noticed when I was editing that I seemed to be laughing a lot. I wouldn't want anybody to think I was being disrespectful of him or taking the piss out of him. It's just that we laughed so much in both the pre-interview and the recording, and he was so self-deprecating. We were just two guys laughing at life. I was laughing with him, not at him. I thought it was a breath of fresh air. Now our class of 23 has whittled down quite a bit, although two of our class members today are getting to the sharp end of the trail and still pushing on. We're going to hear from Mary Marks soon, but first, here's Mark Carpenter.
Hello, Mighty Blue.
Hey, Mark, how are you? How's it going?
Yeah, it's going good.
Yeah. I've been reading your blog or your Facebook entries and so on, and you've been exhausted. We mentioned this last time, but you seem to have perked up a bit recently. So, how are you feeling right now?
Actually, I'm feeling really good. I was down in the dumps there for a little while. I don't know, hit my Vermont blues, I guess you'd say. I was kind of missing home and missing the family, but kind of rejuvenated. Had some good days and found somebody to hike with. So
tell me about that. Tell me about Navigate. Is it Navigator?
Yeah, Navigator. The day before it was just a downpour, and I had ducked into a shelter.
Uh-huh.
And just feeling really down. And then the very next day, the skies were blue. The beautiful Vermont pine forests were just really intoxicating. And got some trail magic. And while I was at trail magic, there was some other hikers there, and just kind of hit it off in conversation. And Navigator was hiking to the same shelter I was. We've been hiking together for about a week or so.
Is it a guy? Is it a girl? Or and what age?
It's a guy.
Yeah,
it's a guy. He's about 5 years older than me.
Okay, right. So two old guys on the trail. Excellent.
There you go.
The old guys rule. I keep telling you. That should be. I should write a book about that. Old guys rule. I think that'd be popular. I've got you. You always give me the greatest notes. And mosquitoes were brutal in Massachusetts. No shit, Sherlock. No shit, Sherlock.
I have my full body armor, long sleeve pants, long sleeve shirt, got the bug net over the hat, feeding myself underneath the netting. It was brutal.
Yeah, and getting into your tent, it's a fight to get in quickly enough and shut the place off, isn't it? Really, you end up with about 100 in there with you, don't you?
I know it. I'm like, I'll zip it. I'll have my shoes on and I'll keep my shoes outside the netting and zip it all the way and keep my feet outside while I'm getting my preparing my
Wow.
bedding and everything.
Yeah.
But you're right; it's a struggle to keep them out.
And talking of preparing your bedding, looks like you've had. I can't believe you've had 2 mattresses go kaput. What does kaput mean in your case? Did it burst, or I mean, what is it? Is it just not holding the air? What's happened?
Yeah, leaking air, and getting up in the middle of the night, finding myself on the ground.
Oh,
I just said, heck with that. I'm going with a foam pad, and I thought it would be really kind of hurt my back and all, but actually it's working out.
oh,
I
really?
like it.
Good.
Yeah.
And what mile are you at now?
Great question. I'm gonna look it up real quick.
You stayed. You stayed. You're in a town or in off trail today, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm at the Barn Door Hostel. I'm at mile 1786.5.
Wow, blimey, you're almost there. Only 400 miles to go.
I know it. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you started thinking about that? Well, I guess you've been thinking about it all the time. But have you started thinking about when you might finish, or have you got it in your mind?
Yeah. I've kind of done some estimation, and around September 8th is what I'm looking at. And that maybe the September 8th to September 12th range.
Right.
My youngest son is actually talking about coming back up and hiking Katahdin with me. So
wow, that'd be cool. That would be lovely to go up with family. Yeah, how cool would that be? He needs to get into practice now, though, doesn't he? Really, because that's not going to be easy for him.
Yeah, he got the taste of it there in New York, and he didn't like it.
There you go. In that case, he certainly ain't going to like Katahdin.
Right.
And you met up with Poppins again, which is nice.
Yeah.
So tell me, you were at a shelter. One of you just walked in, and there was the other one.
Well, no, actually, we saw each other on trail, and we were both headed to the same shelter.
Nice.
And I actually went to the tenting part, and I think she stayed in the shelter.
Right.
We saw each other the next day, but soon after, I took a 0 day, and so I haven't caught up with her yet. And
you say that was a 0 day in Manchester Centre. You said it had been 11 days on the trail. That's a long time to stay out there. Why did you choose to stay out there so long?
I was feeling good, trying to get miles accomplished. Like I said, at the time, I'm really looking forward to seeing the family and getting back home. So I just want to get it done. And
you said that your body and your mind needed a rest. I'm sure your body did. And were you getting a bit down? You were getting a bit down because of home or because of the weather?
I think maybe a combination. The weather hadn't been great, a lot of rain, the mud, and I didn't like the beginning of Vermont. It just seemed really dark, in the forest and muddy, and and there happened to be a lot of gray skies. It just wasn't feeling it, but then it got all better.
I can remember that. Funny enough, going up Killington, it's quite a gentle approach, and you start going up, and it's very mossy and very deep, isn't it, in there? I can remember that as well. Yeah, just you saying that made me think about it. But it's epic, though, isn't it? I think it's a great climb up there.
Yeah. After Manchester, they got the greenery and the white rocks, the pine forest. It just seemed to kind of really jump out. That point, you just really noticed it, and they look beautiful. And
you reached Hanover 4 days ago, August the 4th. So where are you? What have you been up so far in New Hampshire?
So yesterday we crossed over Smart Mountain and Mount Cube.
Ooh.
In the pouring rain.
Oh,
I missed out all the views. I hated it.
I tell you, you guys have had some really extreme weather, extreme heat, and extreme rain this year. So this is going to be one of those years people think back. That you guys really went through it, particularly up in New England when you were there as well. And so you say it's quite nice today, and of course you're not hiking today.
No. After last night. We just said, I'm taking a 0. Right. And of course, today, it's not raining.
So you're going to go up.
It'll rain later on, but not now.
Yeah. So you're going to go up Moosilauke soon, in the next day or two, I guess. I went up, when I did Moosilauke, I went up from the north side and I went southbound. I was kind of, to be honest with you, I was scared of the prospect of going down the north side of that, because there's a waterfall all the way down. And if it's and it's very steep as well, and if it's slightly wet, I would have worried about that myself. Are you going to go south to north, or are you that much of a purist you want to go south to north?
Not necessarily. I've only slack packed one day, and I feel like I'm entitled to some more slack pack.
Damn right, of course you are.
I'm good. That's what I'm leaning towards, and especially after yesterday, and a lot of those quartz rock and granite rock faces. I mean, yesterday I just took a fall. I was just standing there.
Oh wow! You weren't actually moving?
It didn't feel like I was moving. I was standing on a rock, and I was kind of looking down to see where I might put my foot, and then whoop, my feet went out and landed right on my back.
I can tell you, and hopefully you're going to agree with me when this happens. When you go up Moosilauke, I think you realise that you stepped up a gear, and that's in everything, in the views, in the awe-inspiring majesty of the rocks and the climbing down and the going up, and all of it is just suddenly such a different level. So I'm excited for you. I know you. It might be tough, but it's meant to be tough. So let's not worry about that.
Right. And that's where I'm a little torn. I want to get home and everything, but this is some of the most beautiful part that's coming up. So I want to slow down and enjoy it too.
Well, don't you worry about that. The whites will slow you down anyway. whether you want them to or not, they're going to slow you down. Or whatever pace you be keeping up, halve it. I remember we did, when in 2014, we did 11 miles in a day through the whites, and we were really pleased with 11 miles, and that was often hiking as long as 11 hours as well. So,
wow.
But we were older than you, and we were still struggling in different ways. But it's such a special place that I'm envious of you doing it, because this is absolutely the icing on the cake, or the cherry on the top, whatever you're going to call it. This is what you came here for. This is going to culminate in Katahdin in whenever it is, another month's time. But don't not enjoy this month. This month is so much the thing you're going to be remembering all your life going forward. So you've got so many great memories to make. So just suck it up, Buttercup. and if you need to stay out longer, because you're going to be so pleased you did this. This is the best place. So I'm excited for you. Well, look,
great.
Stay safe. Enjoy your break today. And don't leave it 11 days before you have another break, because this is going to exhaust you as well, because this is going to be tiring for you. So have a great time. I'm sure you will, because it's going to be great. All right. And my best to Navigator, even though I've never met him.
Okay.
All right, buddy.
Well, I appreciate it very much.
Okay. You enjoy yourself. All right. Cheers, then.
I will do.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
He sounded much better today, though, as you heard. He's not enjoying being away from home for so long. And it's one of the things you need to factor in if you're going to commit yourself to a 6-month hike. Life is going to be different. You won't be surrounded by your family, and you're going to miss them. We all find community out there, but think about how you're going to feel without that love and support from home. Not everybody can do it. And Mark is so close now, I'm sure he's going to grit his teeth and push on through. Before we hear from Justin Mullins about the Allegheny Trail, our heartfelt thanks goes, as ever, to our incredible donors. Monthly donors Jens Lippheide, Lisa Rana, Brian Helton Jr., Woody Bass and Natisha Webb stepped up again, with generous one-off donations from Phil Pierce and Curtis Fackler, plus a totally unexpected one from somebody who wants to remain anonymous. Just know I was blown away by this person's generosity. You know who you are. Thanks so much to all of our wonderful supporters. If you get value from all our shows here on the network, why not show your appreciation by signing up for a monthly sum or a one-off, like all those great supporters I read out just now. And you can also go to hrntradingpost.com if you'd like to see one or two new shirts I've put up on that site as well. Now let's hear about the Allegheny Trail with Justin Mullins. I've got to warn you, I almost forgot to tell you this. Justin's got a parrot. A very loud parrot somewhere in his house, and by the sound of things, pretty close by. I managed to either mute or quieten him down a little in the editing, but when I come back to you after the interview, I'm going to play the actual sound of the parrot as I heard it in my headphones. It was amazing. So here's Justin and his parrot. Well, my guest today is currently Justin Mullins, but it may also be one of his parrots. Hey, Justin, how are you?
Not bad. How are you doing, Steve?
That's your parrot.
Yep.
Oh dear. We'll see how that works. Anyway, and you come on today. You reached out to me, and you talked about having worked since 2020 as a section coordinator on the Allegheny Trail and a board member of the West Virginia Scenic Trails Association. So tell us about the Allegheny Trail, because I don't really know anything about it, and I think, and I know you through hiked it. So tell us what it was like to through hike it, and what type of trail is it?
Well, the Allegheny Trail is a 311-mile trail that is mostly in West Virginia. There's about 20 or so miles that'll be in Virginia, but the northern terminus is at the Mason-Dixon line that joins with Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And the southern terminus joins the Appalachian Trail just north of Harrisburg, Virginia.
Right. Oh, I tell you, that parrot is doing me head in.
It's going to give you a run for your money.
Yeah. So, how did you get to know about it in the first place? And what is it like as a trail to hike?
I first learned about the Allegheny Trail when I was in Boy Scouts, when I was doing a high adventure camp. We did a 10-mile hike on the trail at the time, and
All right.
that was my first experience with it, but I never really got involved with it until around 2020, mostly due to COVID, just staying off the Appalachian Trail.
Right.
I just started off just using it more as a training hike for my Appalachian Trail section hike.
Right.
But I just decided to through hike it in fall of 2020.
Is there an association like the ATC that runs the Allegheny Trail, and were they advising people not to be on it, or were they quite relaxed about it?
The West Virginia Scenic Trails Association manages the trail, and they were all fine with hikers on the trail, and we had work events starting around June of that year. We took all the precautions and everything while we were out there. But when you're hiking on the trail, you're not really going to see really many people at all. So really being exposed to it on trail would just be very low.
Right. So you say you don't see many people. Does that mean because people don't hike it so much, or there's not much infrastructure like, shelters and things like that?
Really, it's not a well-known trail. It's getting more popular now since it's gotten on Far Out, and it's picked up a lot of publicity over just being on the Far Out app. But they're still not as widely known as the AT or other long-distance trails.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of towns it really goes through, or anything that's really popular towns or cities, anything like that for it to go through. It's just really small towns, Durban, West Virginia, Cass, West Virginia, kind of tourist areas, but they're very small.
And so is the trail one of these things that some people might look to go on as an alternative to the AT because it gets you alone? One thing about the AT, it isn't a lonely trail, is it?
It definitely not. I've hiked on the AT many different types of the year, and you'll see people pretty much every day. But on the Allegheny Trail, you can go days without running into people. I hiked the trail in 19 days, and I could count 6 people I saw on trail.
6 people.
6 people. And
wow.
They were near trailheads, just the main, within a couple miles of the trailhead. So
probably day hikers then.
Day hikers. There's a couple people on a bike.
Right.
But there's really, I would go days out there, really just not seeing anybody.
Right. So was that what attracted you? I mean, I know you couldn't get on the AT, but did it attract you? Do you like being by yourself on a trail?
I really did enjoy it. I mean, I didn't think so at first, but I mean, being out there for days on end, for me, I enjoyed the peace and quiet.
Hang on. You like the peace and quiet. You got this bloody parrot going on in the background.
Yep, the streets in the background will definitely make you want some peace and quiet.
So, as I asked you earlier on, did you say whether or not there is an infrastructure like shelters or not?
Yes, there are shelters on the trail. We
Right.
recently built one last year, so we are
Nice.
trying to get more shelters along the trail.
Right. But you would just camp anywhere, I presume, then, wouldn't you? You wouldn't necessarily camp around shelters, would you?
Yeah, I would camp. A lot of the trail goes through Monongahela National Forest, but there are parts on Section 1 where it's some road walks, which is past private land, so you'd have to be strategic with your camping through there. But
Right.
a lot of the trail you can just camp just right off the trail in a lot of places.
Right. And you just mentioned Section 1, so it's divided into 4 sections, is it?
Yep.
Talk us through those. What are they?
All right. Typically, unlike the AT, where you hike Nobo traditionally, the Allegheny Trail traditionally is a Sobo trail. So you'll start at the northern terminus in Section 1, and then you'll hike down. It's kind of broken up just for mostly maintenance reasons. It was divided up into 4 sections.
Yeah.
Section 1 is mainly the road walk where you're on dirt, gravel roads, going through a lot of private lands before you really get into the national forest.
Right.
But once you enter Section 2, get into past Blackwater Falls and a lot more opportunity for camping on trail. Section 3 just kind of divided up kind of from Davis, West Virginia to Cass, West Virginia for maintenance purposes. And it went all the way through a couple state parks and ended up near at a road crossing where it split off into Section 4.
Right. So you decided to do the through hike itself, and when we spoke before, you said it was something like you said something. I took some notes. I'm not quite sure exactly what you meant here. It's like Benton Mackay would walk it. What do you mean by that?
Mostly, when Benton Mackay hiked the AT, it would be more forest roads, more road walking, and it just feels like it would be how he did it in the early when he first hiked the trail. It was just dirt gravel roads. It really wasn't as well known. Didn't have trail magic or anything like that. It would be closer to his experience on the AT.
Right. And there must be a challenge then to resupply. If you're not going through many towns anyway, how did you work out resupplies?
Well, where I was lucky, my dad met me at a couple strategic places through the sections to resupply. But if it wasn't for that, I would have had to send mail drops to post offices or some camps or businesses along the trail. But we do have a couple businesses that will accept mail drops, and places like that we put online for people to send drops to. But one town you go through, Durban, used to have a grocery store, a laundromat, but they closed down.
Wow. That's a pretty obscure place to go there. So you probably stay on trail most of the time, didn't you?
I did most of the time. I mean, I stayed only.
You must have been humming when you finished, Ed. 307 miles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I stayed in town in Durban. They have a little. It's called the Station 2 restaurant and hotel.
Yeah.
I stayed there, but really, the rest of the time was just going through trail. I went home for a couple of days since I was lucky enough to be close by, so that kind of broke it up a little bit. Other than that, I would have been on trail almost every night. But there are options to get a ride into town or stay at a bed and breakfast on Section 2.
Sure.
I just embrace the being out there alone. I love that. And there's really about 80% of the trail is no cell service. So I really didn't have much communication besides my inReach.
Wow. And you say that next year is the 50th anniversary of the trail. But you got some plans for it. What are you planning on doing?
Next year, it's going to be in September. We are going to be up at Greenbank Observatory.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked with them, and they're going to let us use their property to host our 50th anniversary.
Nice.
I'm picturing it more similar to like trail days. There's going to be events on the property. We'll have bands, vendors, food vendors. Really just somewhere to celebrate the trail and just have a good time.
But, the problem with attracting more people to a trail, which may not have the infrastructure to support it, that's a dangerous balance in it in some ways. Have you thought about that? Because if it suddenly becomes popular, can it cope with a lot more people?
That's one thing we really have took care of when people contact us asking about where they resupply. We have a list that we give them. We do have people that offer rides or stays at the house that we
All
will
right.
give them that information.
Nice.
So it is really important that you do contact us ahead of time to do this trail, because we have had hikers contact us. Fortunately, made it to town okay, but they didn't download the guidebook, or they just thought they just completed the AT and they thought they could take on anything. And
Of course I do.
they decided to do the trail in the winter time, and it's just they barely made it to town with a couple of days out with no food, and it's definitely something you don't want to underestimate, because you don't have service or as many resources to rely on.
And I think you intend to do. You've done the Allegheny Trail through hike, but aren't you intending to do it again over the winter?
That's my plan.
Why?
Well, the only time I can take off long periods of time at work is in the winter time. So I've kind of embraced the winter hiking. The last couple of years, I've been able to do it.
Good for you.
The Pinhoney Trail last year and linked that with the Benton McKay Trail. And that was about a 450-mile hike.
Nice. Haven't you got ambitions, though, to make this a loop incorporating the AT? So tell us what the plan is then and what you need to do that.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to advertise the Allegheny Trail as a loop that uses the AT and would also use the Great Allegheny Passage and C&O Trail to make a probably over 900-mile loop when it's complete. Which it really wouldn't be bad. There's only, to connect the northern terminus to the Great Allegheny Passage, it's only about a 20-mile road walk to get to Ohio Pile, where the Great Allegheny Trail passes through. Right. So really, it wouldn't be hard to do that now. If I have enough time next year, I'd love to do part of that loop.
But what you're going to do, though, you say it's a road walk. Is that a road walk, or is that dirt roads and forest roads, or is that actually roads with cars?
That 20 miles it's going to be a little bit of trail, but it's going to probably be about 10 miles on paved highway. That's why I want to hike it myself to see what it looks like before we advertise it more, and then put out a route and advertise it. So.
And you say the trail's currently 311 miles. Is it would that be a good shakedown hike? In other words, is the experience of being in there, apart from the fact that it's pretty isolated, but is the experience of being there somewhat akin to being on the Appalachian Trail?
It really is. Sections 3 and 4 really remind me a lot of the southern half of the AT. Nice. You've got some steep climbs, the mountainous terrain, a lot of ridge lines up through there. So it really is similar to what the AT would be if you started at Springer.
Wow, nice. That sounds like a good idea for a shakedown. And you also mentioned that Jester and Austin are doing a film about it as well. So what are they going to get on it and hike it, or what?
Hopefully this fall we can get them on trail. They came out this June and videoed our W5 work event, which is a week-long trail work event where we pick a section of trail, we go up and down the trail, and we work on some trouble spots. They joined us that week, and they filmed for that Saturday.
Nice.
To see just the trail maintenance side of it. So they plan to come out in the fall to get some more footage of the trail, some of the hikes and such that we have planned this fall. So I think it's going to turn out really good. I mean, Jester and Austin did a really good job on their MST videos.
Yes,
and I was
they did.
glad to get them involved with it.
Yeah, I bet you are. You know what? You are one of the people, one of the types of people who really encapsulate the spirit of being committed to a trail, don't you? I mean, it is. You know, there are several people I know who, when I think of the Pinhoti Trail, I think of Nathan and Kim Wright, and now with you, you know, you're on this committee and you're so committed to it, and you're going to do it in the winter. Frankly, I can see why you would. You want to get away from that parrot, but it's quieting down a little bit. But look, there you are. He's there again. But look, I appreciate you coming on and telling us all about it. I think it's an interesting thing. So, when is, if people are interested in actually going, is there a website people can visit, and when is this event going to be?
Yeah, they can go to hikethealleghenytrail.org.
Mm-hmm.
And they can also check out the Allegheny Trail Facebook page where we post events,
Nice.
trail work. But if they want to come out to our 50th anniversary, it's going to be September 6th and 8th of next year, 2024.
Right.
And
okay.
it's going to be at Green Bank Observatory. It's
Where's
really unique.
That?
It's in Green Bank, West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very unique location. It's giant satellite dishes they use for observation of space.
Oh,
and it's really
cool.
something. The Allegheny Trail walks along the ridgeline behind the observatory.
Oh,
so you
nice.
can giant satellite dishes are walking along the trail, and there's a huge place that they are going to let us have to host this event.
That's awesome. That's going to be
It's really
great.
going to be unique. I mean, most trails, just being able to see all these giant satellite dishes along the trail, it's really unique. And one reason why there isn't cell service, because it's a 50-mile radius national quiet zone. So you can't have any radio signals or anything. You have to have diesel engines in a lot of the areas.
So you don't have. So if you're using a Garmin or something like that, or an InReach, is that going to work there?
I've got signal there. It does work.
All right. Okay. To be honest with you, Justin, that's kind of important, because some people need to have that contact and need to want to let people know where they are. So it doesn't. They can't have a 50-mile blackout. That's way too much of a blackout, though, haven't it?
Yeah. It really. It's such a remote area, so you're going through probably over 200 miles of almost no cell service from Section 2 all the way to Section 4, and it's very rare that you get a signal in Section 3.
You've got to really want to be on the trail then, because I've noticed in my AT hikes that, you know, people do like to have cell service. There's no question about that. Yeah. But look, I appreciate you coming on and talking to us about it. Send me the links, and I'll put them in the show notes when we put this one up. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, buddy. Take it easy. Okay. Cheers.
You too. Bye.
Bye. I wasn't kidding, was I? And just so you can hear what I was dealing with, here's the unmuted parrot. Yeah, that was fun. But back to the trail and to Justin. If you like your hiking alone, it sounds like the Allegheny Trail could work for you. He said you can go days without running into people. I know for many of you that would be perfect. Not for me. I like people too much, but I can see the attraction of a 5-day or more solo hike for some people. I'm adding a picture of Justin and his parrot in the show notes, along with links about the trail if you want to find out more about it. I intend to include a few of these shorter interviews on other trails in the future. If you've got one you'd like to talk about, just register as a guest and tell me about it. You can find the registration link in the show notes. Now, the remarkable Mary Marks, direct from the Eliza Brooks shelter, where it's pouring down with rain. I had to doctor the audio quite a bit here, as the rain, at times, was very intrusive. Here's Mary.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, Mary, where are you now?
I am at the Eliza Brooks shelter, which is just south of the Kinsman Mountain.
Oh, wow. So, you're there. So
I'm there.
And you sent me this fascinating text. You said that you were terrified to attempt the mountains. You went up Mount Moosilauke And as you approach the summit, you were taken over by a calm that you can't explain. Talk us through that.
Yeah, I was just so afraid of these mountains, just the vastness of them, the 4,000-foot peaks.
Yeah.
And concerned about the weather and just, am I going to be able to do this physically? And kind of stressed over it the whole morning climbing Moosilauke, and I got to the top and it was just so peaceful.
Yeah, awesome.
It's really hard to explain. It just, a calm came over me, and I just felt just so humbled by this whole thing.
You know what, Mary? You've done 1,800 miles, 90, I'm not sure what the number is right now. You've earned the right to be at the top of each of these mountains. You've walked there, you've got there every time. And hopefully you've gained some confidence in your strength and your knowledge of what you've done so far, because that must tide you over well, surely.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely helped with the confidence that I could do this. And because, I was fine until I got to New Hampshire, and then I started to have a few doubts.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Maybe just because I left Vermont, where my last, I call it my last lifeline, because my friend in Vermont was the last person, that I was walking to, that was like a comfort zone for me. And now I'm totally out of my comfort zone and finding out what I'm really made of here.
But you're obviously enjoying being out of your comfort zone in many ways as well, aren't you? Because the reward you get at the top of these mountains is unlike anywhere else. I mean, and I was actually talking, funnily enough, earlier on to Mark Carpenter, Heimlich, earlier on today, and he's about a day or two behind you, and he says that. Getting to the top of these mountains, it's a challenge, but we're getting there, and so you are getting there as well. And I said to him, when you get to the top of Moosilauke, send me a picture, because it's such an awesome view, isn't it, up there?
It is. It is just, words just can't express it, and pictures can't even give you the full view of it. It's just amazing.
So what was the weather like up there?
I had a beautiful day.
Oh,
it was a little cooler. I had to put on another layer, but I had a beautiful day. Not completely clear skies, but no rain, because we've had some rain past week.
Yes,
that's made things a little sloppy.
Yeah, you've had some pretty bad weather in the north. There's no question about it. And you've also said you fell a few more times. So are you actually shouting out the number of your fall when you fall or not?
No, but I'm pretty much know which number I'm on.
Oh, where are you? See if you can beat me.
About 12.
Oh,
about
12. That's nothing.
Yeah, not too bad. And some of those weren't as bad as others, but this last one, my trekking pole pretty much saved me, because I fell onto it and snapped it in half.
Oh, wow,
so,
really? Wow.
Yeah, snapped right in half, but it saved me from a worse fall, I'm sure.
And are you shaken up when you fall? I know I always was. It makes me a bit more careful or nervous for the next half hour or so, because you realise how easy you can go over, don't you?
Yes, yeah, it definitely. I mean, as careful as I try to be, it just happens.
Yeah.
And it makes you a little paranoid.
Funny enough, Mark told me he was standing up, and he just fell over standing up. Which is not good skills, is it? So,
oh my gosh!
And you got the Kinsmans in your near future. So
tomorrow morning.
What are you thinking about that?
I'm okay with it. Yesterday I was again a little terrified, but once I get back on the trail, I'm fine. And once I start, the approach of these, today wasn't bad, because it was just going up Wolf Mountain, and the elevation was like 3,400 where I went today, and wasn't bad at all. But yeah, I'm a little intimidated by it, but I look at it one day at a time, where I want to be and what I'm doing. So I cut down my mileage a lot, like in half.
Yeah, but you know what? That's okay. And I think cutting down your mileage, you're forced to anyway, because it's much tougher the terrain you're meeting, isn't it? So you probably take a little bit more care anyway, don't you?
Yes, I am. I'm going maybe a mile an hour, and getting to camp early, which is nice because I have time to just rest up and for the next day.
Yeah. And I was going to ask Mark, I asked Mark this, have you started to think about when you might finish, or are you just not thinking that far ahead, or is it literally just one day at a time, see how it goes?
Oh, no, I've planned that day right from the beginning, because I gave myself 221 days.
Oh, right.
Which will be September 18th.
Wow.
And I'm pretty much right on track for that.
Wow.
Yes, I kind of had to plan that ahead for my shoulders to come up and summit with me.
That is impressive. 221 days. How did you actually work that out, though? Did you just allow yourself a certain number of miles per day?
I calculated 10 miles a day, and I started, with the approach trail.
Sure.
So,
of course, yeah.
2,200 miles, 2210, I guess, is what I was looking at. And I'm on day 183, maybe?
Wow, cool. You're nearly there.
Right around 183.
This is tougher now, but, you're so prepared for it now because you've got the miles on your legs. Now, are you feeling stronger in yourself, or are you starting to? Because I know towards the end, I started to it was debilitating. I was starting to lose so much weight that I think I was lacking my strength. How are you coping with it physically now?
I think I'm doing good. Surprisingly, I haven't lost any more weight. Since like the first month, I'm pretty much have been able to keep my weight on, and my knees have held up well. Yeah, physically, I'm holding up surprisingly well. When I'm climbing the mountains, it just takes me longer, and it's not that I'm hurting.
Yeah.
It's just I just don't move that fast.
It's okay. It's not a race. What do we say? Last one to Cotard wins.
Yeah, might just be that winner.
But you know what? You're going to be there before a lot of people are there, so I wouldn't worry about that. You've done amazingly well. You really done phenomenally well. And I was wondering about this the other day when I was thinking about, because I wanted to obviously speak to you on the show this week. You've now been without Wiley for, a couple of weeks now, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. How different is your hike?
Yeah.
And are you glad now you've seen what you've seen so far in the Whites? Are you glad that he's gone home?
Mostly because of the weather. I'm glad he's home. I think so far, the terrain he would have been able to handle. Easier for me because my pack's lighter, the less water carry.
Sure.
And on these mountains, that makes a big difference because when I did Moosilauke, it was my 5th day out, and I had literally no food left except for a few snacks.
Wow.
And my pack still felt so heavy.
Wow.
And my base weight's under 20. I'm probably maybe 18 pounds base weight. It just felt so heavy, and that was with an empty pack. So without his extra things and the extra water, it's made a big difference.
Yeah, well, you know what? That's a good thing then.
It is, yeah. I know I made the right decision there.
Good.
It would have been hard just because of the rain and, it's just, yeah.
Well, look, this is no secret.
I don't regret it.
This is no secret for you, but you've got some exciting old days coming up. You really have. Are you going to stay?
I know.
Are you going to stay in any of the huts? I think we did talk about that. Are you going to do some of that?
No.
Oh, you're not?
We haven't talked about that, but I have plans to pretty much stay at least 4 of them. I'm going to make my reservations this week for those, but definitely the one, the Lakes Above the Clouds, definitely that one, just because.
Yes. I slept on the floor.
1 or 2 before.
I slept on the floor in that one. I did work for stay and slept on the floor.
Did?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah. I'll tell you feel like a real tramp when you do that. I don't think tramp means the same thing. A vagabond, rather. So, yeah, it's kind of weird for an old guy to be lying on the floor when all the guests go to bed.
Lying on the floor. But, I'm definitely going to take advantage of those huts, just so I don't have to carry so much through next week.
Yeah.
That's coming up. That's going to be Friday when I I'll get off the trail tomorrow and then take a day Thursday and Friday morning. Yeah, I'll be right back on and starting that Franconia Ridge and beyond.
You're going to love it, Mary. I promise you, you're going to love it.
Oh, gosh.
It is epic and so beautiful when you're up there. So look, just enjoy it. I'm glad we were able to touch base with you actually on the mountain, which is so cool. Stay healthy, stay happy, and we'll catch up again soon, okay?
Thank you, Steve. Good talking to you.
All right, Mary. Bye then. Bye.
Bye.
How about that? She set herself a 221-day target and she's on schedule. Mary has always said that she's not fast, but she's certainly determined, isn't she? In fact, she told me afterwards that she left the hostel that morning. There were 30 hikers there, and she was the only one who got a shuttle back to the trail. Amazing. And the fact that her plan is working goes to show that she knew her limitations and stayed within them. A very good lesson we could all learn. I'm adding a picture of Mary this week on Moosilauke in the show notes, and we'll have one of Mark at the same place next week. Finally today, Jules Stefanos experiences a truly wild night on Mount Washington, and that is not a place you want to experience a wild night. I'll see you next week. Thursday, the 8th of September, 1983, mile 1809.4. It was mostly cloudy in Crawford Notch at 12:30 when I set out on the Appalachian Trail. A nice, stiff breeze was blowing, the air was fresh and dry, and the day was much cooler than the last few had been. As usual, that 12:30 start was considerably later than I wanted it to be. I was looking to get going before 10, but of course I didn't. Same old story. Climbing the Webster Cliffs was not the ordeal I remembered it to be from earlier hikes. The ascent was remarkably steep, but a great deal of excellent trail construction work had made it a much easier climb than the Liberty Springs Trail had been. I didn't take one break until I arrived at the top of the first set of cliffs with their excellent view of the notch below. I really didn't need to stop there either, but I wanted to enjoy the spot, so I took a 2-minute standing break, drank some water and ate a granola bar. My first sit-down break was at the summit of Mount Webster. It was 2:15 and I had hiked the 3 most difficult miles of the day, so I sat down for 10 minutes and celebrated with more water and 2 Pop-Tarts. Yay! Party animal! The sky had been gradually clearing as I went along, but the clouds moved back in and then some as I climbed Mount Jackson. From the 4,052-foot summit, I could see the entire length of the trail ahead to Mount Washington. Mount Eisenhower's summit was slipping in and out of the clouds, and the top several hundred feet of Washington was completely sucked in. From Jackson's summit, I descended back below the trees and continued along the ridgecrest to Mitzpah Spring Hut, located in a wooded col below the summit of Mount Pierce. I stopped on the front porch of the hut just long enough to eat another Pop-Tart. I considered topping off my water bottle for the trail ahead, but a quart of water remained. A stiff climb up Mount Pierce was on tap, so I decided not to carry the extra weight. It was quite cool on the ridge after the heat of the past few days, and a powerful breeze was blowing. The weather sheet at Mizpah called for 50-mile-per-hour winds at the summits today, and I could find no reason to argue with that prediction as I went along. Like most winds, they would die down a bit to a good fresh breeze and then gust again at unpredictable intervals. I was concentrating on making up some lost time and often distracted by the ever-changing landscape and views. My legs were soon torn and bleeding from the impact of my body being buffeted by the gale into sharp rocks and bushes adjacent to the trail. The sun began to re-emerge as I came out onto the south summit of Pierce. By the time I made the main summit, the entire mountain basked in sunshine and the clouds had lifted from the top of Mount Eisenhower, though they hovered dramatically just above the summit. From Pierce's 4,310-foot summit, the Appalachian Trail remained above treeline for the rest of the day's hike. I got some excellent shots of the Dry River Valley and Montalban Ridge to the east, as well as the various summits and spur ridges of the Presidentials. Traversing Mount Eisenhower, the AT skirts the summit, avoiding the exposed crests on which hiking is not recommended in foul weather, such as today's hazardous winds. Naturally, I took the loop trail over the summit. The wind was howling insanely. When the trail turned smack into the wind just as I topped the summit area, I was almost blown over backwards. For a few minutes, things were intense. Fortunately, most of the ridge was partially sheltered from the full force of the blast once I descended from the actual 4,761-foot summit. After Eisenhower, the trail descended into a col before another stiff climb up Mount Franklin, the first 5,000-foot summit of the day. The sky had cleared very nicely by the time I reached this summit. I got some great shots of Mounts Monroe, Washington and Clay. How did he get in there? Along the trail ahead. The few clouds remaining in the entire sky had lifted well off the summits, save one, the cloud that still blanketed the top of Washington, covering just the very tip of its summit cone. It was getting rather late, so I stayed on the Appalachian Trail as it bypassed Mount Monroe, which I had previously climbed, and didn't stop at Lake of the Clouds Hut, located in the col between Monroe and Washington. I began the final assault on Mount Washington. The mountain summit resembles a huge barren pile of loose rocks, and those rocks make the steep climb somewhat tricky and time-consuming. Slowly, I approached the sharply defined bottom border of the vast cloud as the sun, sinking low in the sky beyond distant Franconia Ridge, tinted it with gold and orange. It was like ascending into heaven. I reached the fringe of the cloud and plunged inside. The view of distant mountains faded gradually into the golden mist, and then it was gone. I was entering another realm that most definitely was not heaven. As I climbed, the fog thickened and the light faded until most of it was blotted out. I ascended through a dark, desolate landscape of black rock and dark grey cloud as a hellish wind screamed around me. It was beautiful in a strange way, but it was of perilous beauty. I might have been on another planet. A final surprise awaited when I broke out onto the flattish summit area at 7 o'clock. It was a howling madhouse up there. The wind doubled. I was becoming dangerously chilled and walking became almost impossible. I was tossed about like an old newspaper. I had to lean forward with my arms at my sides and my body extended forward with my nose barely inches above the ground in order to move forward at all into the teeth of that tempest. In that posture, I could have beaten anyone in the world in a limbo contest. I struggled towards the state-run summit house and shelter. Everybody limbo. Somehow I made it. I went inside to call my mother and tell her I would be walking down the 8-mile auto road from the summit. The original plan had been for her to drive up and pick me up, but the wind and my late arrival had closed the road. The people at the summit house told me I could spend the night there, and that sounded like a very interesting experience, but I didn't feel it would be fair to my mother, who was up here to spend some time with her son. I discovered that my mother had arranged for me to catch a ride down the mountain on one of the tanker trucks which were going to be bringing fuel for the summit buildings up the mountain all night. The man who let me into the summit house told me he would give me a ride down to where the trucks unload as soon as one was ready to go back down. He came back at 8:30 and told me the truck was ready. The speed at which he threaded his pickup down steep hills and around hairpin turns, winding through the maze of summit buildings in zero visibility, was incredible. He must have known every inch of that road. He did not slow down once. The wind was really ripping by then. It took every drop of my strength to open the door of the pickup when we reached the fueling area. Once outside, I could barely walk. I was trying to move forward. The wind kept blowing me backwards. It took me 2 minutes to make it over to the tanker, the most difficult few feet I ever walked. The tanker drivers were all wearing parkas in the bitter blast, and I was in shorts and a t-shirt with just a chamois shirt thrown over them for warmth. I was cold. 5 minutes after we started down, we were below the clouds and wind. It was a gorgeous starry night, with a few clusters of electric lights visible in the valley below. We made it down to the bottom in no time. My memories and the fresh scabs covering my legs were all that remained to me of a wild night on Mount Washington. Friday the 9th of September 1983, mile 1822.3. Last night's weather forecast called for increasing clouds today with a chance of rain tonight. Thus, as I drove to the Mount Washington auto road from Gorham, I was not expecting too much. What we got was one of those perfect days which are so rare in the northern presidentials, but which for some reason I seem to enjoy every time I venture into these mountains. We drove up the road to the summit and I started hiking at 12:15. I told my mother to meet me at the road crossing in Pinkham Notch at 6:30, and she stayed at the summit house for a while to enjoy the gorgeous day. I climbed over the actual 6,288-foot summit of the tallest mountain in New England and started down the other side. The last time I hiked the presidentials, the Appalachian Trail didn't traverse this summit. Thanks to a short connecting trail which links the Old Side Trail to the summit with the Gulf Side Trail, which is now officially part of the AT. I had intended to stay on the AT and bypass the summit loops over Mounts Clay and Jefferson, which I have previously hiked, and take the summit loops over Mount Adams and Mount Madison, the only two presidentials which I have never climbed. However, the day was so perfect that I had to hike the Mount Clay loop for the best views on the range of the vast semicircular valley nestled in the long curve of the northern presidentials, known as the Great Gulf. A lot of hikers were on trail today. Each time I travel these miles of open alpine ridgecrest, it always makes me wonder how some people can spend their entire lives down there below the clouds. There's a stark beauty to mountains such as these, which cannot be found anywhere else. Even the quality of the light itself is different. At that altitude, the air is cleaner and thinner. Thus, light is considerably less diffused than in the lower world. Everything looks sharp and clean, with sharply defined shadows and strong light and dark contrasts. I stood and drank in the beauty. I pondered the futility of memory. If those of us who have walked these ridges could truly carry with us the memory of this place, we can never allow any lengthy period to pass without returning. I did take the 80 round the summit of Mount Jefferson. After all, the forecast was calling for increasing clouds. I made my way to Thunderstorm Junction, a spot where several trails intersect in a high saddle between three of the peaks of Mount Adams, and turned onto Lowe's Path for the ascent of the main summit of Mount Adams. It was still a beautiful afternoon, and the views of Mount Madison, Mount Jefferson and the surrounding valleys made the long side trip to the 5,798-foot summit well worthwhile. I hung out for a while before descending into the col between Adams and Madison. Madison Hut marked an important landmark on my through hike. I'd covered all the sections of the Appalachian Trail which I had previously hiked. Everything ahead was now unknown territory. I stopped at the hut just long enough to check on the weather forecast. The AMC weather sheet was also calling for rain tonight. In this col, the Gulfside Trail, which the AT had been following, ended, and the AT followed the Osgood Trail up Mount Madison. The Gulfside had been a nice trail for the White Mountains, but the Osgood Trail was very steep, very rocky, and somewhat hard to follow. At the summit of Mount Madison, the ridge crest of the Presidential Range abruptly comes to an end. Southward are great views of Mounts Washington, Clay and Adams. Looking north, the slopes drop precipitously away on all three sides, providing unsurpassed vistas of the Androscoggin River Valley and the Wildcat, Carter and Moosilauke ranges. As I stood there on the summit, I noticed high clouds were moving in fast from the west. The next few miles of the AT descended sharply along the crest of Osgood Ridge, remaining above treeline for another mile or so. Hiking this stretch of trail ate up an inordinate amount of time. It was one long pile of rocks and the grades were steep. I had to carefully pick my way along. That is extremely frustrating when you're in a hurry, which I was by this time. I was running about 2 hours late at that point, but I was frequently compelled to stop and crawl down smooth rock faces. All of those starts and stops prevented me from maintaining anything like my usual hiking pace. Eventually, I entered the woods, dropping below treeline for the first time today. The rocks gradually petered out, but the going did not become much easier. The AT turned right off the Osgood Trail onto the Osgood Cutoff, which dropped like a stone off the side of the ridge. I had to make my way very carefully down that sheer drop into the Great Gulf. Frustration was eating away at me. I was running later and later, yet I was crawling along, not because of exhaustion, but because of the treacherous trail. My leg muscles were like caged tigers, eager to explode into action. I threw them a hunk of meat and told them to heel. I finally reached the floor of the Gulf, where the AT turned onto Madison Gulf Trail and followed it through the Great Gulf Wilderness. I crossed a wide rushing stream, the west branch of the Peabody River, on a suspension footbridge and at long last encountered a good piece of trail where I pushed myself into high gear. It was already dark when I crossed the Mount Washington Auto Road along the crest of the low ridge 2 miles later. I passed a couple of nice viewpoints along that ridge before the AT began the final descent of the day along the Old Jackson Road, a grassy, abandoned woods road. It was flashlight time again, with almost 2 miles to go. I made excellent time until the very end, where numerous other woods roads crossed the Old Jackson Road. This section of trail was poorly marked, and I wasted a lot of time hunting for white blazes in my flashlight. Eventually, I began to distinguish the lights from Pinkham Notch Hut flickering through the dark mass of the forest. I arrived at New Hampshire Highway 16 in Pinkham Notch at some time after 8 o'clock, more than 1.5 hours late. Fortunately, my mother had met another backpacker who was much later in reaching the road than he had expected, so she was not yet in panic. The forecasted rain had held off, although I hiked into the night. It was once again cool enough along the ridge crest today that I had to wear my heavy shirt until I passed below treeline. The weather may finally be starting to break in my favour. Perhaps the long hot summer is coming to an end.